What's up, bass players? Jesse here, and you are watching Jesse TV. Today, I am coming at you with some knowledge, with some wisdom. You're not going to miss this. Over the years, I've learned a few things, mostly what not to do. And I've also fielded a lot of questions through YouTube and running gigs, running into other bass players. And I'm going to share that with you. So you know what time it is? It is time for another fresh, hip, hopping, sock flopping episode of Right now, I am coming at you with straight bass knowledge, wisdom. Bass players, I can't even begin to answer every question I've ever had in this video, but we're going to jump around to a lot of good stuff. And I'm going to start just right into gear. So I have a sweet looking orange instrument cable. People ask me, what is that instrument cable? It's sweet. And one thing you have to know about me is, yeah, I like to look cool. I like things to be nice. Maybe as a bass player, I'm a little flashy, what have you. Are not all of us that way? But what I can tell you is not only do I like things to look good, but I want them to be functional. I want them to bring good value and be economical. So I'm going to tell you this. Whatever instrument cables you're using, if they're not this one cable, I want you to give them away or put them in just permanent installed places like around the house or whatever. Don't take them on tour. Don't take them to gigs. Don't actually use them. I'm going to tell you the one cable you need to use every day forever for the rest of your life. And I'm going to tell you why. I was going to show you the brand of this, but you almost can't even read it. That says Spectraflex. Spectraflex cables. I have two of these. It's braided. It's a wonderful cable. Now, here's what I'm not saying. That these cables will last you forever. They will not last. Pretty large pedal board. And before I get into ambient bass, I want to answer just a couple questions about general bass effects pedals that any and every bass player, that it would be applicable to them whether you play ambient bass or not. And one question I get a lot is on the area and realm of preamps. Do you need a preamp with this kind of bass, that kind of bass? What's the point? All this, blah, blah, blah. One of my, well, I'll say my most watched video is a review on the SansAmp programmable DI. And it is an amazing DI. It's built like a tank. There's a lot of options, a lot of tone control. You plug it in, your 1/4 inch in one end, and it's got a XLR on the outside. So it's a direct box and a preamp all in one. It's sweet. Now, do you need all that? Do you need a pedal with mid treble bass, with the XLR, all that stuff? The answer is no, you don't. By very definition, a preamp takes a weak signal and amplifies it to help get it better and more clear to your front of house or to an amplifier. It's by definition, it's already optional. If you have a passive bass, if your bass doesn't take a battery, if it's old school or it's just purist or whatever, if it doesn't take a battery, it's going to be passive. You could benefit from a preamp because it's going to boost the signal. If you're trying to play through an amp and you feel like you're always cranking it all the way up or 3/4 of the way, you could probably benefit from a preamp because it's gonna warm up that signal. It's going to warm up the volume. It's going to give it a gain boost. Most preamps have volume and gain on them, so you can really get a lot more volume out of your bass before then taking it to your amp. The signals also, with it being cleaner, you're not going to be working your amp to death. So that's if you have a passive bass. If you have an active bass, it's definitely more optional for you. Now, I've almost always had active basses, but I've also always had a preamp. Well, Jesse, why? If it's optional, why? For me, it's preamps. Good preamps offer more versatility and features with tone shaping. And like in the case of the programmable Sans amp, you can just with a click of a button go between different tone settings instead of adjusting it on your bass. And here's the other thing about when you are shaping your tone on your bass is that when you shift, say you're going from a blended 50-50 pickup split, and then you go towards the front or go towards the back for different tones, your volume level is going to drop. A sound guy is going to murder you between sets. If you're doing your tone on your bass and now your tone drops off and now you got to hit your volume, you're trying to figure all that stuff out mid-gig. Or you're driving the sound guy crazy because he's having to ride the fader trying to figure out where did you go, and then the next second you're blowing his ears off. So if you can find a setting on your bass, and for me, I pretty much just go even EQ. If I've got a bass knob in the middle, treble knob in the middle, bass knob in the middle, the pickup split I'll do based on what I want it to sound like overall, get it as close to the tone that I really desire overall, and I will set it and forget it. I set my bass knob and I forget it, and then I use my preamp. And with a preamp, it's a little bit easier to adjust. If you know you want different tones or sounds, I strongly recommend you getting a preamp like the Sans amp that's programmable, that you can easily click between different ones. And as you're programming them, adjust the overall or adjust the gain on each individual program so that the volumes match from each program tone to the other. So if you're playing just clean tone, then you go to an overdrive or a real distorted tone, you can make sure that the overall volume is the same. So when you go back and forth, the volume's the same. And there's not a drop off or a huge just amplification of tone when you're going back and forth. So again, preamp, yes, optional, but I've always loved and appreciated the benefits. And if you decide that you've got an active bass, you've got all the control that you need, and it is sweet. There's a lot of sweet basses out there. Just this Court Hang on the Wall has a Mark bass preamp, active preamp in it, and it sounds amazing all by itself. If that's what you want to do, at the very least, one just added benefit in a lot of preamps is that it is acting as a direct box already. So if you don't go with the preamp, you're probably still going to want to get a good direct box. Now, my Dark Glass Vintage Ultra, which is a preamp, I don't use the XLR out on it. I don't use it as a direct box because I have two signal chains that I'm summing later on in my effects chain that then I need them both to go through one DI. And so I have a Radial JDI. Radial is one of the best brands on the market. I definitely recommend them. I've had several of their DIs. I even got a little mini one that I use for using my iPad to send tracks or just a pad through. And I travel with that thing. It's a tank. So preamp, necessary? No. Amazing? Yes. Let's move on to the next thing. Bass effects. So one of the other videos that I get a lot of questions on is a video that I talked about using a Boss CS3 compression pedal for bass. Now, when I made that video, there wasn't a lot of pedals specifically made for bass. So bass players like myself that were hungry to get into effects and we're trying to tap into some of the amazing world that guitar players have, we were left just trying to buy stuff and see how it would work for bass. Or if you were lucky, like I was with the CS3, there was a company that I bought it from that modified it for bass. Now, that said, it worked well, and it was definitely better with that pedal than not having that pedal. having that compressor that I could have to help get me in a good sweet spot for then a sound guy to then mix was wonderful. And the sound guys in my life loved that choice that I made. However, there was a lot of noise and hiss in it. And so as technology is improved, I have long since replaced that compression pedal. So here's what I'll tell you. When it comes to buying any effects for bass, I would strongly recommend that you find pedals that are specifically built for bass, not modified and not just guitar. Why? Because it's 2021 and there are a lot of options out there. And what I've discovered in the beginning and over time, have I slowly made more upgrades, bought pedals, sold pedals, replaced ones, and then bought the old one again. Guys, I've wasted a lot of money in this. So please trust me a little bit. Pedals that are created specifically for bass, they do a better job at preserving the whole frequency spectrum that the bass occupies, and a lot of that low space that guitars don't occupy. And you may not perceive it in your ear through your combo amp in your room, because your combo amp isn't even able to articulately or very well articulate all of those frequencies in the whole range. But when you go to a venue that has subwoofers and is able to pull out the clarity of all that you're putting out, you'll find that something's missing. And there have been, to my demise, shame internally, and freak out multiple times, where I have crafted an amazing room tone by myself in front of my amplifier and fine-tuned the pedals and everything. And then the next gig I go into, I'm like, why does it sound like that? It doesn't sound anything like it sounded to me in my ear, in my room. And so just a bit of advice when buying pedals, even if you're looking at my older videos, please reach out, leave a message, ask what I would recommend today, because technology and products are growing so fast. Please don't default to just guitar stuff or modded stuff. Next question. So what specific pedals do I use for ambient bass? And the most important question, can you nearly get the same effect on a budget? Yes, you can. Now, the basics of ambient bass, and I won't go long into this video. The basics of ambient bass are delay, reverb, although not necessary, and then a volume pedal for some manipulation of that delay. Delay is what helps the note hang around and creates the layers. Reverb is what kind of blends the layers together into a wash that sounds more amazing and friendly to the ear. And if you're trying to do swells, then the volume pedal will allow you to help create that kind of cello sound, of where the sound kind of comes in and then it comes down and it's all nice and soft. It's not so dry. Or just if you hit a note and you just turn it on and turn it off. With the volume pedal, with delay and reverb, when you take the volume all the way down, you still have the delay and reverb trail that's there and slowly coming down. So it's like landing a plane really nicely. And before that plane lands, you can hit another note and turn the volume back up. And so before that plane lands, you're taking off again with another ambient note. So you're able to chain and string ambient notes together, and it sounds great. Again, shameless plug on my ambient soaking videos, ambient bass videos. You can hear a lot of what this is. So can you do it on a budget? Yes. There are a lot of combination pedals out there now. Delay and reverb combination pedals. I use the Wampler Effects. Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. I think it's the Ethereal. There's also the Dispatch Matcher. Batch mastered by Earthquaker Devices. I had that on my board for a while. So you can't tap out the tempo that you want to play for the tempo. It's a set tempo, or you can turn it on your knob. So if you're trying to just play around or do some stuff in the studio, if you're not trying to do it live and need ultimate control, you can start right there. It's going to give you a basic delay with a decent amount of reverb to start with the whole tone. Now, here's the good news. If you start with that and then decide that you want to build out more, you can basically build out a setup that I have where I have a delay reverb combo. But before that, I have a delay by itself, the Nova delay, which is essentially kind of two delays built into one with tap tempo. And then behind it, I have a separate reverb, which is the Descent by Walrus Audio. And that actually has the ability through an expression pedal to go between two different presets. So I can even with an expression pedal make the ambient tone, the reverb, the heavier part of the reverb, go from more of a wet to a mixture of dry and wet. So it gives me a lot of control over my ambient effects at one time. Not only that, my Nova delay pedal, they have a lot of different delay presets, and I've got a separate kind of remote pedal to cycle through presets that I've made for myself. If anybody has more detailed questions on that, hit me up, post a comment. I respond to all the comments, and I'll give you more on that. Last question. Bass actual construction. I know we're talking about a lot of things in this video. Bass body construction, what's the different, what does it do? I have a lot of people ask me, what about this bass versus that one? Or what about this one? And here's the general rule of thumb. The best bass is the one that you like the way it sounds. I know that sounds kind of cheesy, but it's true. You might love one bass over a bass that I love, even if we play the same genre, because it even comes down to feel. When it comes to a bass, to me, it's almost like if you've seen Harry Potter and he goes to get his wand, they say that the wand chooses you. To me, the bass chooses me. And over time, it's like you pick up a bass and it feels good, but it doesn't sound good. But it's that mixture of, man, this thing feels like butter, and I'm immediately getting the sound that I want out of it. If you go to the guitar store and you're checking out basses, I strongly encourage you that whenever you're trying out basses, to get on maybe a 210 or 212 amp that's going to try and give you a good clear tone. If it's a 15 or too big, you might be too conscious about just the overall bass coming through and disrupting other customers around you and all that. But get something that's going to give you clear tone at a medium volume. Don't turn on any effects. Just do a flat EQ on the amp, and then start working with the dials and controls on the bass, and you can really hear the full range of what it has to offer. Now, I will give you some head starts right here on what to look for. If you want, and I'm not going to go into pickups because that is a whole other thing. It can be a whole other video. But general bass construction, I've had mahogany basses, I've had swamp ash, I've had alder, I've had rosewood necks, I've had maple necks, I've had rosewood maple necks, I've had combination of wange and rosewood necks, and they all do something different as far as the tone that the bass itself is going to produce naturally under string vibration that then the pickups actually pick up, and then your controls modify. So what we're going to talk about in the next minute is what wood construction does to the source tone of a bass. I'll tell you what I've read, also with what I've noticed. And for most people, this may not even be that perceptive to the ear. If you've got an amp and a preamp and some pedals, and you've got a good preamp in your bass, you can almost create whatever tone you want, no matter what bass you get, as long as it's decent quality and it's set up well. But it is good to pair a good bass construction for the general style or feel that you want to go for. Now, I'll tell you the reason why I went from mahogany to swamp ash. I'll just start with that, and this will give you an idea. Mahogany is heavier than swamp ash. Number one, I wanted a lighter bass. The reason why I picked mahogany in the beginning is because I wanted the as full of a low end on the low B and the E as I could get. And I also wanted the best sustain that I could get out of my bass. So I was doing some research, ended up with an Ibanez BTB. It's a 35-inch scale. So it's a longer, just, an inch longer than standard scale for a full-size bass. And I went with the mahogany neck through. Mahogany naturally will highlight the low end, and it's a very strong wood, so it really holds up well to the pressure that you hitting the strings puts on the bass. So mahogany gave me just that. Like playing it through a large arena, it would just rattle the roof off naturally. Not only that, but the Ibanez BTB, it had Bartolini pickups and electronics, so a good quality preamp. But the reason why I ended up switching is because in ambient bass, I want those mid to high mids and treble to really be articulated well. Really more of that mid and mid high to be articulated well. And what I've noticed is that on my preamp, on my board, I was doing a lot to try and boost that area while also having to cut the bass. And I was just thinking, if I'm having to cut the bass this extreme, if I'm trying to model my tone to any kind of extreme level, there's got to be a different bass out there that can get me closer to my ideal tone before I try to put any effects on it. So doing some research, I found that not only is swamp ash lighter, but it has more of that kind of natural grit, that mid clarity. So I knew that I wanted mid clarity, so I went for swamp ash. A lot of basses out there that you pick up maybe when you're learning, if you got a good mid-level or entry-level bass, a lot of them are alder body, and they're going to have, they're going to be painted and have clear coat. Probably the reason why that is because alder is not a pretty wood, but it's a great universal all-around bass wood. So if you've got an alder body bass and it sounds good to you, you probably don't need to do anything different. I will tell you that swamp ash to me just brings a little bit more clarity, and it is lighter. When it comes to fingerboards, I will be very generic and basic, and I'll tell it to you like this: darker woods, like rosewood and wange on the neck, they're going to give you, they're going to favor, like mahogany, towards the low end, whereas lighter woods are going to help highlight that mid-range, that high mid-range. So if you're doing jazzy stuff, if you're playing with the pick, if you want to really cut through naturally without having to add drive, go for lighter wood, go for swamp ash, go for a maple neck, go for a two-piece construction. If you just want heavy, low end that then you could manipulate, I would say go mahogany, go rosewood. If you're doing jazz and you just want warm round tones, maybe mess around in that mahogany area. But go to the music store, pick up different basses, play them, but take note of what their construction is. So you're not just seeing strings or pickups or the amp or your tone control, but you're actually seeing the bass for what it is and why it was built the way it is and what it's going to do for you. Like you buy an SUV because you want to carry stuff, and you buy a sports car because you want to go fast. You don't buy a sports car and then try to jam pack stuff in it. Don't do the same when you're shopping for a bass. Think about what you want, do some research on what bass constructions will get you to your ideal tone as naturally as possible, then go from there with your effects. and all that. But guys, this has been fun. Questions that you have, put them in the description. By the way, I'm also still taking guests for the show. If you want to be a guest on the show, if you want to talk about tips, tricks, things that you've learned, frequently asked questions, you want to show off your gear, you want to goof off and hang out, put a comment below. I'm scheduling shows weekly. I want to just keep adding value to the bass community, and I want to unite us. Guys, I'm trying to show my appreciation for the bass community, and at the same time, don't forget that you can partner with me showing appreciation for bass at the Let's Talk Bass shop. There's some sweet gear in there. Bass notes matter. You can go to shop.letstalkbass.com. Links in the description below. But guys, I think that's going to do it. Just drop me comments, say what's up, and I will see you in the next one.
Slap that like button like Victor Wooten slaps some bass.